Welcome to the InfoSec Insider podcast, brought to you by URM, the UK's leading information and cybersecurity specialists.
Hi, my name's Annie and I'm joined here today by Neil Jones, who's one of our senior consultants here at URM. Welcome to another episode of InfoSec Insider. So today Neil and I are going to be talking about ISO 42001, which is a new AI standard. So just to start us off, Neil, would you mind explaining just what is ISO 42001 and also what isn't it?
Yeah, so ISO 42001, it provides guidance, or intended to provide guidance on how to govern and effectively manage the production of AI systems. So it allows organizations to validate the fact that their AI systems that they're developing, providing, or even using are responsible and effective. It's important to note the using bit there. It is not limited to AI providers and producers. It is also relevant to AI users, especially in respect to things like having an AI policy and what the AI policy should include. It helps to establish a level of trustworthiness and develop a responsible AI product. That's a buzzword that is becoming more used. RAIs, responsible AI, and 42001 is geared towards that. The standard is not intended to be a how-to-do AI guide, so it's not there to tell you how to develop an AI system from scratch, and it will not necessarily guarantee compliance with mandatory regulations, such as the recent EU AI Act that has been ratified. It's also not intended to align with any particular regulation or legislation at all. So whilst it might be very helpful in enabling you to achieve compliance and does expect you to maintain awareness of the relevant regulations, it does not replace them. And that's reflective of the fact that it's a very global standard, and the regulations, of course, vary significantly around the world.
How is ISO 42001 structured?
Well, fortunately for those of us who are familiar with ISO standards as a whole, it follows a very similar structure, the so-called harmonized structure that you'll have seen in things like ISO 9001 and ISO 27001. So the main body of the standard sets out the requirements in the familiar clauses 4 to 10, but introduces some unique aspects to all of the clauses, with the possible exception of clauses 7 and 10, which are very similar to the other standards. One of the things that's come in, one of the new aspects within clause 4, for example, relates to climate change. Again, people will be familiar with this. This has been introduced into other standards across the range now, including 9001 and 27001. But it made its appearance first in AI, and that very much reflects the resource-intensive nature of AI, so the computing and data resource intensity, and also the requirements for power and air conditioning that goes with that, with those requirements. So the climate change considerations presented in the standard, they have been mapped to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, numbers 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, and 14. So not a complete set, but not far off. But you can learn a little bit more about that if you want to in our blog, ISO and IF add climate change considerations to the Certified Management System standards. So yeah, if you're interested in that particular area, but it's certainly relevant to the AI world. There's been other changes, and the most significant being in clauses 6 and 8. So you're still required to do risk assessments as you would be in, say, ISO 27001, but the approach is slightly different that you would need to adopt because the risks that you are trying to address are quite different. You're addressing AI risks as opposed to security risks. But it also introduces the requirement for AI impact assessments, which is by far the biggest change, I think, across 42001. Quite a significant effort required to complete the impact assessments and to maintain them. The requirements for these are detailed in a separate standard, the sister standard ISO 42005, which is unfortunately still in draft. It's not been published yet, but we expect that to be in the not too distant future. And that sets out in quite a lot of detail the sort of things you should include in your AI impact assessments. So other than the mandatory clauses up front, we then also have a number of annexes, as we have in other standards, but they've taken a bit of a departure here. So Annex A, for example, is pretty much the same as you would expect from ISO 27001. It defines a reference control set, which, unlike the clauses, and as with 27001, they're not compulsory. They are a reference control set from which you can select controls that are relevant to your organization based on your risk assessment. Unlike 27001, though, they rather helpfully include in Annex B the implementation guidance for the controls. The equivalent in ISO 27000 series is the ISO 27002, which is a supporting standard and sets out all of the implementation guidance. But as I said, in this incarnation, 42K, it's actually included as an annex in the same standard, so which is quite useful for reference. You don't have to switch between multiple documents, and you get the whole kit and caboodle by buying the one standard. There are then two further annexes, Annexes C and D. They provide guidance on organizational objectives and sources. And Annex D provides guidance on the use of AI management systems across different domains or sectors, particularly relevant across for large multinationals.
And what is the AI management system that you just mentioned there?
Yeah, you'll hopefully get lots of new acronyms. As usual with new standards, you get lots of new acronyms. So in this case, the AIMS, the Artificial Intelligence Management System. The basic approach is very similar, as it kind of reflects the fact that the clauses are similar between 42001 and, say, 27001. If you've got a QMS for 9001 or an ISMS for 27001, you'll recognise the structure and what you need to put into it. It sets out the requirements and provides guidance for establishing and maintaining and continually improving, of course, an artificial intelligence management system within the standard. As I mentioned, the AIMS is strikingly similar to what you would expect from another management system. There are some variations specific to this standard, specifically around context and objectives of the organisation, the need for an AI policy, has quite a lot of guidance on policy, roles and responsibilities, which ties in nicely with policy, of course, planning, risk assessment and risk treatment. As is mentioned already, that there are some slight variations there. The AI system impact assessments that are required, as I said, by far the largest change from or departure from other standards, and also performance and management review, performance evaluation and management review. These all have slight variations all the way up to massive variations, as I say, with the impact assessments. Due to the similarity to other ISO management systems, it lends itself very well to becoming part of an integrated management system. Obviously, for organizations that certify to multiple standards, it's very useful to have a single management system to maintain, which meets the requirements of all of the standards. It fits in quite nicely with that approach. If you want a little bit more depth about integrated management systems, you can read a blog that we have on that as well, a comparison of ISO 9001 and ISO 27001, which, as the name suggests, focuses on commonalities between 9001 and 27001, but in principle is equally applicable to 42001.
Thank you, Neil. And just the last question I have for you is, how do you establish the trustworthiness of an AI system?
Yes, the sting in the tail. Last question, but probably the biggest one. Yeah, this is obviously where there's a significant deviation from other standards, because really 42001 is all about the ethics and associated with an AI system, not just the use of it, but also or the misuse of it, but also how it's produced and how users can establish a level of trust that what the AI system is providing to the user is reliable. So the certification to 42001 is essentially a verification of the trustworthiness of an AI system. So if you have a 42001 badge that you can put on your system, people should be able to take away a level of comfort from that. In short-ish, trustworthiness is articulated through distinct qualities, which they tend to be termed as perspectives in ISO 42005, or at least in the current draft, relate to the standard in the AI set. These perspectives are defined in the context of benefits and harms to interested parties, and this would all be articulated in your impact assessment. And they're grouped into 8 categories, basically. And those 8 are accountability, transparency, fairness and discrimination, which collectively relate to bias within the AI, privacy, reliability, safety, explainability, and environmental impact being the new topic which came in with the standard. I mean, I could talk all day about these. It's a very large topic on its own. I'll just pick out a few of them with a little bit more detail by way of example, really. So for accountability, for example, what they're getting at is, well, basically who is or what is answerable for the actions, the decisions, or even the performance of the AI system. And this can be tricky to assign in the context of AI. So if you think about an example of an autonomous vehicle which drives maybe through a red light with the vehicle owner in the back seat, who would receive the ticket in that context? So the poor police officer stands in front of an AI vehicle and says, I need to issue a ticket. Who gets the ticket? The owner of the vehicle, despite they were not actually in control of the vehicle at the time? Or would it be the AI producer? So whoever developed the AI and got it wrong, or the AI itself. So we consider the AI as an entity that could receive a ticket in this situation. It's not well defined in law at the moment. I'm sure there will be test cases in the future. But what this perspective is attempting to determine is, for any given AI, who ultimately would be accountable for the activities and the actions and the decisions rendered by the AI. Another one, fairness and discrimination. As I mentioned, this is basically relates to bias. So this is basically making sure that the AI renders impartial decisions that are, well, to read from the script, free from unjust or prejudicial treatment of individuals, organizations, or groups of individuals or societies. So basically, it is free from bias. What you tend to find is that algorithms, or more commonly, training data that's used to train the AI algorithms, can be biased by the people who are actually producing the AI in the first place. So, for example, there was a well-known or a well-publicized case, shall we say, in America, where AI had been used to predict recidivism. That is the likelihood of reoffence of prisoners and individuals who are on parole. And it had demonstrated a bias towards black people to be more likely to reoffend than white people. And that was based because the historical training data, which had been used to train the AI, reflected prejudices that existed in the past, and therefore they were perpetuating that discrimination by the use of the AI. It was identified and addressed, but that's a very well documented case in America. So what we're trying to do here is to demonstrate that there is a lack of bias, in particular in the training data that is used to train the models. Safety is another area, which is some good examples. And this basically relates to consideration for the AI systems that can endanger human life or well-being, or even property. So it would generally tend to relate more towards systems, AI systems that involve some sort of mechanical actuation, such as assembly line robots or self-driving vehicles. However, it can also relate to AI systems that render decisions that can impact a person's health or well-being. So, for example, an AI system might be used in healthcare that is producing prescriptions or diagnoses for patients, and those prescriptions or diagnoses could be incorrect based on how the model has been trained, and that could obviously have a significant impact on the patient's health and cause risk to life. So risks to safety can be present, therefore, in a much broader range of AI systems than you might initially think. And this perspective is all about trying to assess, to take that step back and look at your system and how it's going to be used, and therefore think about what impact it might have, not just on physical safety, but mental or general well-being. And then last one I'll quickly talk about is the environmental impact, since that seems to be the topic of the month with 42001. AI systems can have significant potential to negatively impact the environment. I mentioned this briefly earlier on. The AI systems tend to consume voraciously the resources, computing resources, storage resources, and the associated supporting utilities will increase as well. So air conditioning power consumption will increase with the increase in computing resources. So that's a straightforward impact on the environment. But how you can actually address that, this is a slightly more esoteric approach that can be taken for helping here. You're obviously trying to address this. You need to try and reduce the amount of computing resources that are required to operate your model. And what can be brought to bear to help with that is using efficient coding practices to reduce the amount of code that needs to be executed, which in the context of an AI model, a small change in the efficiency of the code can make a big impact on the resources required. So this really brings efficient coding practices to be as important in the context of ISO 42001 as, say, secure coding practices are for ISO 27001. Improving the efficiency of the coding can reduce the processor load and storage requirements and hence reduce your environmental impact.
Well, thank you very much, Neil, for taking the time to sit down with me today. And for anyone that wants to learn a little bit more about this subject, Neil's written a really great blog that could be found on our website, urmconsulting.com. And it's called ISO 42001 and AI Perspectives. And he goes into a bit more detail across all of the different perspectives. So yeah, check that out. And thank you so much for listening to InfoSec Insider. If you've enjoyed this podcast, we would really appreciate it if you could spare a moment to leave a rating or review at ratethispodcast.com/InfoSec Insider. To listen to more episodes, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and Podbean.
Thank you for listening to URM's InfoSec Insider podcast. For more information, visit our website at urmconsulting.com.